Today we are at Kelvedon Hatch. Kelvedon Hatch has a secret nuclear bunker. It was built during the Cold War and it houses up to 600 civilian and military personnel. It's the headquarters where the country would have been run by in case of a nuclear war. We are very lucky to be joined by Mike Parrish. Mike is the owner of this incredible place, the secret nuclear bunker. Mike's going to tell us all about how he acquired it. Hi, Mike.
Hi. Well, in 1952, the government approached my grandfather and wanted to know whether he would sell them this 25 acres of land. It was under the threat of compulsory purchase, but as he'd fought 2 world wars, didn't want to fight a third, he thought it would be a good thing that he could do. So the Air Ministry, as it was then, got this 25 acres, bulldozed the hill away and built the bunker. It's 100 foot underground, and you can't see it obviously apart from a mast that's on the top.
It does sound like the war's still going on actually. You could hear the firing in the background, as long as you're still not fighting the battle today.
That's keeping the pigeon off the brake.
Now you are going to take us on an incredible tour, aren't you, today? And you're going to tell us all the information about all the different rooms and who would have been here if a nuclear war did break out.
I would hope to do that for you.
That sounds great. Shall we go on the journey?
Let's do that.
Excellent, thank you.
This is the actual guardhouse where the guards would have been based. They lived in the bungalow that you've already seen as you came in. And there were always guards on duty here. The doors were shut, the shutters were shut, and nobody could get in here, of course, because it was top secret. You had to show your pass before you were allowed in to make sure you were bona fide. Now, of course, this is the normal entrance for the public. They come in here, they help themselves to a wand, which gives them the tour, and they go off into the bunker and do the tour. Well, this is the entrance to the bunker. And behind us here are the generators. There are 2 main generators here, so obviously if the mains electricity goes down, as it will do once the bomb has gone off, these will automatically cut in and supply the bunker with its lights and heat and power.
Wow.
The tunnel, as you can see, is 120 yards long, and it was used obviously to get in under the hill into the bunker itself, and as a defensive mechanism. If you're trying to get in, you've got to traverse this, and people with a gun at end would pick you off quite easily, I guess.
So this is 120 feet long?
Yards.
Yards?
Meters.
Meters.
Yes. Young thing like you only deals in meters. That's right.
And so how deep, when you actually get inside it, does it go down?
When you get inside the bunker, you're going to be 100 foot underneath the hill. But here, obviously, you're not so deep because you're going actually into the hill now.
You're going down on a slope.
Originally, there were bunk beds all the way down the side of this corridor here, because obviously, keeping 600 people in here for 3 months, you would need to have more bunk beds.
So this was used as a bedroom as well?
Once
Well, not
yes.
bedroom, but dormitories. So this is where the bunk beds would be, well, literally hooked to the wall, and so they'd all be quite... Well, it's quite a few, isn't it? It would go all the way down here.
They would indeed. They're hooked to the wall, obviously, so they fold up, so you can still use the corridor for taking forklifts down or whatever you need to do.
So would they have slept in shifts? Because obviously if people were coming back and forwards down the tunnel, they would have been woken up every 5 minutes.
That's exactly the problem. We've obviously got dormitories as well, but yes, they did have shifts, and when they held the exercises here, one of the last complaints they had was that when you came off shift, you went into a dormitory, there were no bedside lamps, you switched the lights on, you woke everybody else up, so in fact you didn't sleep much. But I'm not sure that in the real situation you would be so exhausted, I think you would sleep through anything. Well, as you've gathered, the bunker was built under a hill, so they bulldozed the hill away. They put 25 foot of gravel down to act as a shock absorber, so that if a bomb did go off locally, the bunker would shake rather than be solid and collapse. They then poured the walls, and the walls, as you can see, are 10 foot thick reinforced concrete, and around that they've got a Faraday cage which stops the electromagnetic pulse from interfering with too much of the electronic stuff in here, and a brick skin with waterproofing that would obviously keep the water out, because you're underground, you don't want it just filling up with water. Bunkers, you can see, is on 3 levels. We're at the bottom here coming down the tunnel. They put concrete burst caps in so that, again, if a bomb went off locally, theoretically, I don't quite understand how, but they would give and expend some of the force rather than it putting pressure on the roof. And on that, as you can see, we've got a 150-foot tall mast, which would be talking locally to other bunkers. They then push the dirt back again, and what you see now, of course, is nothing except for the top of the mast. All our water is buried underground. The electricity, as we've talked about, comes from the generators. We are totally self-contained in here, and could be locked down for upwards of 3 months with about 450, 500 people.
Wow. Do you know how long it actually... Do you know how long it took them to actually build a bunker?
It took them a mere 7 months, from start to finish.
Is that all?
Absolutely. When needs must, they obviously do it.
incredible.
It would take you that long now to get planning permission.
Right, I guess if there was a threat of a nuclear war happening, then they would
You'd certainly get a move on.
They'd be digging it very fast, yes.
That's right. These are Geiger counters. You'll see a lot more as we go
Ah.
around. Radiation you can't see, smell, or feel. And so the only way you know it's out there is by having a Geiger counter. And this is the Geiger bit, and there's the counter.
I think I remember one of these actually from when I worked in the science lab.
They go click, click, click.
Something similar, yes. I don't think it was quite like that, but I do remember the Geiger counters, yes.
They've also, as you'll see as we go around, you've got little ones that go on your wrist. And they've got dosimeters that are like a little telescope that you look down as well, just so you can...
I guess they're a lot more high-tech today.
No, not much more.
Oh, really?
No, not
I
really.
would have thought so. There you go. Do you just tell us what goes on here? It looks very technical for its day.
Well, this is the Home Office radio room.
Okay.
Its job was to talk to other bunkers. The district council had them, borough councils had them, the utilities had them, and so from our mast we'd have been talking to them. About half a mile away in Kelvedon Hatch there's an enormous, great big mast
Yeah,
as
I saw
well.
that actually as we came in.
We're connected to that both by microwave dish and deep landlines, and that would enable us also from here to be able to talk pretty much to the world.
Can you still do that now? Or is
No.
it all cut off?
No, we talk to Canary Wharf from here.
Okay, so they chopped your main connections off,
Yes.
sadly.
But we talk, as I say, to Canary Wharf, so we can still talk from the mast, but not in a military way.
Okay. Right, tell us about these weapons, and awesome and still live.
No, obviously they're all deactivated.
Good.
We have a military vehicle show the 3rd weekend in May, and this is part of that display
okay.
that will be coming on.
So
it's
that's
also
like a
quite
reenactment?
It's a reenactment.
Excellent.
So it's also quite useful, I suppose, because people coming down here expect to see machine guns and the like. There would have been some down here that have been locked away in the safe,
Okay.
just in case they had to defend the place. The Territorial Army would have actually thrown a cordon around the bunker to stop people like you and me rioting, panicking and trying to get in, but equally to stop the people who are in here trying to get out and join their families before the bomb actually dropped.
How many weapons? Obviously, we've just seen a small amount here, but how many weapons would be stored here?
Not many.
Not
many. No.
Okay.
I'll say the army would have been outside protecting us, and so we didn't need guns in here. So it was just the commissioner who would have had access to a gun, should he have needed it.
Do you think there would have been much left if a nuclear bomb had gone off and there was anybody out
In
there?
here we'd be okay,
Yes,
but you'd be worried about your families. You wouldn't know whether they'd survived or not.
that's true. That's true.
Some of them, I think the GPO, as it was in those days, used to issue little brick igloos to their staff who were coming down to bunkers, so at least they had some reassurance that their family had got some protection. These are the blast doors. They each of them weigh about half a ton each, and when they're shut, the 600 or so people would be in here for 3 months. Well, while we're sitting here at the starter mechanism for the generators, which are at the other end of the tunnel. Once those blast doors are shut, of course, then you wouldn't be able to go outside, and so you'd need to be able to start your generators once the bomb had gone off internally. And that's all these do.
Just tell us a little bit about all the knobs and gadgets here.
Well, knobs and gadgets just start the bunker. I mean, start the generators.
Okay.
So, and it's just a monitoring thing, so you know how many revs it's doing, just like in a car.
Okay.
And whether it's running out of fuel and how much electricity it's producing. Because we're 3-phase in here, and so you need to keep the phases balanced. The sirens, they're down here. They would obviously have been outside. They'd have been on a very high pole, and they're the sound that is an undulating sound that tells you there's going to be an attack imminent, or the straight sign, which meant it was all clear, just like the Second World War.
Okay.
They were activated by by Tim, the clock, the speaking clock. You're probably far too young to remember the speaking clock, but the speaking clock line
Yes, I remember Tim.
wasn't a speaking clock line. It was actually to activate these, and in its spare time, it did the speaking clock. And when you heard that, you got underneath your kitchen tables.
You ducked and covered.
You did indeed. That was the Americans. We had protect and survive.
All right, okay. Now this is amazing. It's the old switchboard, isn't it?
It's an old doll's eye switchboard. Yes, and
fantastic.
they're called doll's eye because the little doll's eye comes down, which tells you, of course, which telephone has been picked up. And they work just like the old tin cans and a bit of string. Basically, you plug in one tin can and you join it to the other tin can, and then you can talk. And so the reason we've got these down here, or had these down here, is of course they're fairly immune to the blast because they are just cables.
Yes.
All of these rooms were filled up with this Strowger telephone exchange to start with. The equivalent now is that computer you see over there, which is just a little computer that does as much as thinking. We had 2,500 telephone lines coming in here.
Wow. This is incredible because I think my sister many years ago used to work on one of the switchboards where she would do
They did
all
these, yes.
So when
Evokes many memories to those of that generation.
switchboards?
They've got to be 50s, 60s, probably even later than that, 70s or 80s, I would think. Possibly they brought these out.
Get through to the hotline.
Now, of course, you don't even get an operator, do you?
That's very true, actually. Press this number and try and get through. It's a nightmare, isn't it? Maybe we should bring back the old-fashioned switchboards. What do you think?
Yes, I think our first telephone number at home was Onga 27, you know, and now it's 01277375428, whatever, enormous long numbers. But I think that even the switchboard operator knew who you were.
Fantastic.
And of course, again, you're far too young to remember, when telephones first sort of became popular in places, you actually had to have a party line. You had to share your telephone with a neighbour. And that was because the government were putting all these bunkers in, and were having to devote, or GPO was having to devote all its exercise into putting the cables in that would run these bunkers. And so as population, we came very low down in the list.
It's amazing now when you think of mobile phones, how many numbers they are, and how long the numbers are from when they first started, which was about 3 or 4 digits. Incredible. We've done quite a lot since then, haven't we?
Oh yeah.
Could you tell us about this room, Mike?
Well, this is the Strowger telephone exchange. It's a mechanical exchange, and so it will work even once the bomb has gone off. Modern day things work on a contact or transistors, and the electromagnetic pulse would wipe them out. So although things look old-fashioned, this bunker, you may have seen in the radio room that we got valve radios. That is, again, is because valve radios are more immune to electromagnetic pulse than anything modern with a contact or a transistor.
Well, I was having this conversation the other day about how things got so technical now that there's so much to go wrong with them that sometimes the old-fashioned things work better, don't they?
Bicycles instead of cars.
A lot simpler, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Right, what is this room used for, Mike?
Well, all the display there is just the original tools that a GPO man would need to keep the Strowger telephone exchange working. And these are just different versions of different telephone exchanges as things got more modern. So that is a more well. It's just like the doll's eye. Yeah. It's just connecting, but you don't have to obviously have a doll's eye. They had lights, I think.
Yes, and these up here?
Just equipment for testing voltages to make sure that telephones were working correctly at the correct voltage.
Okay, and there's some more down
All
here.
testing equipment again for the GPO to make sure the telephone lines were working.
I can see you've got the red phone, the hotline there.
You can perhaps hear in the background the pip, pip, pip.
Yes.
And all the time that was going pip, pip, pip. That meant everything was just fine and you didn't have to worry. Once it turned into a wailing banshee, then you knew that bombs were on their way or indeed had landed. And the red phones, again, are what would have activated the sirens. The teleprinter was the main form of communications.
Yes.
The cables were buried 30, 40 foot underground and therefore in theory immune from the blast. They produced a cutout like that, and people could actually rub this and read it, and they could then feed that through a reader into another teleprinter, and so you could then send the same message throughout the country.
Does this have a special name?
No, but it's the same as a ticker tape.
That's what I was thinking.
So it's the same sort of thing. And the country was wired like this, as you can see.
Okay.
And if you wanted to talk from, say, Horsham up to Preston, well, you'd do so via Coventry. But if a bomb had gone off on Coventry, as you can see, you could just go round it. And that was nicknamed the chicken wire system for obvious reasons. And when this all became quiet and the Cold War was finished, then they used that for the internet, which is why the internet was able to get going so quickly in this country, and of course countries that have got this system.
Right. Yes, because I know the internet's been around quite some time, it's longer than people think, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Because it was for the military.
I can't remember his name, but we had the chap who invented it come down here because it was its anniversary a couple of years ago.
Okay.
And so he came down here to do his interview.
Oh, really? And this is?
Well, that's the message form that they use when you're sending out a teleprinter message. Then obviously you have been given a message by somebody, and the operator then types in, and off it goes to wherever that teleprinter was connected to.
This is quite an amazing room, actually. It's been quite busy. If it was to put to
If you're in
its
operation, of course, it would have been very busy. 450, 500 people down here, it would have been very, very packed, even though a third of them were asleep at any one time.
Yes.
It would have been packed, it would have been busy continually all the time. Telephonists doing their business, teleprinter people, operators doing their business, the radio men on their radios, all trying to see what was happening outside and allocate surviving resources to survivors.
So, when it was being upkept by the government, obviously when there wasn't a bomb that had exploded, would people still be in here using this equipment?
Yeah, the guards were here all the time.
Okay.
There were maybe 20 or 30 people came down here almost every day just to keep it all going, and they held regular 5-day or 14-day exercises down here to make sure that it was all going to work.
What is this room used for? This is amazing.
Well, this is the plotting floor. In its first life, there was a hole in the ceiling here that went through both the floors. There were cabins, glass cabins around the outside, and people were looking down on a big map that was actually 5 or 6 times bigger than this. It took up the whole of this floor, and just like you see on television, the WAF was standing around it, moving the counters to show where our aircraft were, and they would then be scrambled to go and meet the Russian bears who were knocking on our door all the time to just see how quickly we reacted. Interestingly, in the early days, our aircraft couldn't fly as high as the Russians, and so we always had to rely on the Americans to put their aircraft down. It didn't last long in its first life, and we were then converted to a regional government headquarters, so then they needed more room, so they closed the ceilings in. This was still a plotting floor, only this time what it was plotting is where the bombs had gone off, which they did on that cold perspex. And where the bomb had gone off, they were either the ground bursts,
Just go and have a look at that.
or the air bursts. The red ones, they're the ground burst. They were the worst because they picked up the dust and dirt, threw it up in the air, and of course radiation is carried on dust, so that's what came down and radiated us. The air bursts, which are the green ones, didn't produce so much radiation, but because they were off the ground, their flash, their bang, their power was more, and so they did more damage to people. And of course the object of this room then was to plot the wind direction and where the radiation was spreading, so that they could then from here also organise the conscription of buses, so that the population could then be evacuated in front of the radiation, assuming it was only a bomb and it wasn't covering the whole of the country.
You can see small maps over here, actually.
Well, this is covering the whole of the country. This is our bit here, but obviously we need to know, so if we got knocked out, the next one of these bunkers at Norfolk or whatever would have then taken over our department. Same the other way round. If they got knocked out, we would take over from them. It was a very mechanical way, almost, of doing this. You sort of had a bit of paper that gave you the information that had come in from the other rooms, and they had to write backwards on the other side on wax crayons, so that the people this side could then see what was what and assimilate the situation.
Again, today it's probably a lot more high-tech, isn't it?
But it wouldn't work because you wouldn't have high-tech, because once the bomb has gone off, there ain't no high-tech.
Yes,
so crayons
it would
and bit
be
of papers are
back to basics, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Okay. These are the desks where they'd all, I guess, mapped it out.
These are, yes, just all part of that plotting situation. All those little dots there are the Royal Observer Corps. They were every 7 or 8 miles throughout the country. Just little bunkers like you see over in the far corner there, 12 foot by 15 foot, had 3 or 4 people in them, and their job was to find out where the blast had gone off, which they did with a pinhole camera, and they would then report that into their headquarters, who would then report it to us. And so the whole country was covered in these little bunkers, so they were able to detect where the blast was, where the radiation was travelling to, wind direction and the like. There again, they're just the same things. You'll see we've got maps in the background there with continental. Yeah. We also did the same thing because a bomb dropping on France would affect us just the same way. And the other one over there that you're just looking at would show you the size of the bomb, what time it went off, how big it was, whether it was a ground burst or an air burst, and its yield, its estimated size, which they could tell from the scan, and the effect that it was then going to have.
And what are these machines over here in the corner?
That's Audrey, yes, that's the Atomic Weapon Detection, Recognition and Estimation of Yield gizmo, and that did what these bunkers used to do, but it had got a gadget outside that would be able to detect the blast. Actually, there's a bit of it here that did it. It looks like a bomb itself, but that would detect the bomb and how big it was, because obviously that information was vital to be able to save the population by moving them out of the way of the radiation. This is in effect a pinhole camera that the Royal Observer Corps had. They had photographic paper inside here, and obviously with the pinhole there, when the bomb went off, it created a little mark, and from this chart they were enabled to tell how high off the ground it had burst, whether it was an air burst or a ground burst, and of course from the size of it, the size of the bomb. They were also then able to take its direction, and these bunkers were usually in clusters of 3, so they then could triangulate where the bomb had gone off. And so they were able to pass that information to their headquarters, and that's how they knew where the bombs were, which way they were blowing, and the damage they'd done to be able to move the population out.
This room that you brought us to looks incredibly interesting. If you can tell us all about what this is.
Well, as you've seen, we've come through another set of blast doors. We're now outside in the contaminated air. And what you're seeing is the cooling towers for the giant refrigerator we're going to see in the plant room. The trouble is that the human body produces a kilowatt of heat an hour. 600 people down here, it's going to be incredibly hot. And so the greatest amount of equipment we're actually going to see is a refrigerator keeping it all cool. The filters over here are NBC filters, nuclear, biological and chemical filters, and they still will work, and they're obviously there to filter the radiation. Normally the air, which is coming down the air shaft behind you, comes in and is blown straight into the bunker. But once the bomb has gone off, then they turn that fan off and switch this one on, which pushes all the air through these primary filters.
Would this still work today? If it was all... It would?
Oh, yes.
So if
there's not much point having a Porsche or a Rolls-Royce in your garage unless you've got petrol to put in it. And we take exactly the same thing. There's no point in owning something like this and not having food and water and diesel down here in case something happens. I would feel very silly, my family would be very cross with me if something did happen and we'd got to queue up at Sainsbury's with everybody else.
Okay. So really, this building, although it's been decommissioned, tragically, if something did happen, which I hope it never does, one could come down here and actually live in this.
Indeed.
Up to 3 months.
Absolutely, yes. Wow. Oh, longer. It's just as long as your food and water lasts.
Yes, that's true.
And if there's not 400 of you here...
The system can keep cleaning the air and the water.
Absolutely.
So it's as long as the food supply
lasts, yes. We've got water buried underground. obviously in big tanks that will last us a long time. Diesel, again, is buried underground, it will keep the generators going. And you'd be frugal. I mean, you wouldn't have lavish parties every night, would you? If you've got that sort of situation, you'd make sure everything lasted as long as you possibly could.
That's right, so you're on a ration as such.
Absolutely.
Amazing, absolutely amazing.
We have Michael's List.
Michael's List?
Well, who do you decide who is coming down here if something does happen?
And that's what you call
And
it.
it's rather like a wedding, in a way. Who do you have to your daughter's wedding? And so you obviously have your close family, and then you go out to grandparents, and then you go to uncles, and then you start getting difficulties, don't you? But it is difficult, because do you, for example, have your son's girlfriend's mother and father?
Yes, it does get
And if you have them, do you then have their children? And do you have their children's children? Where do you stop? And so there has to be a line somewhere.
So you call it
So
Michael's List?
It's like a wedding
Is
list.
that,
yes.
is that your list, or is that...
No,
is
it's
that
because the Spiegel came down here and did an interview with me,
Okay.
and they called it Michael's List after Schindler's List. So that name has stuck.
I mean, that must be a very difficult thing for people to sort out. If this happens, you know, if we ever did have a nuclear war, what would people's chances be today?
Well, there were some people at Hiroshima who were within 300 yards of the explosion who survived. There was one chap who was swimming at the time. He was on holiday in Hiroshima and he was swimming. He survived. He went home, and after the bomb had gone off, he lived in a place called Nagasaki. And 3 days later, he was bombed again, and he died about 5 or 6 years ago, aged 90-something. So you don't necessarily die. There will always be some people who will survive. Obviously, it depends on where you are in relation to where the bomb goes off from the blast point of view, and it would depend which way the wind's blowing, because if it's blowing that way and you're living up there, then you'll be safe.
Well, that story proves the old adage, doesn't it? You won't go till your time's up.
Absolutely.
You can be in all kinds of situations, but if you're not ready to go, but that's incredible. So this
But would you want to be the one left?
That's the question, isn't it? A lot of people say, well, if the bomb went off, I think I'd rather be right in the middle of it than sort of suffering on the outside and going through all the radiation sickness and everything. And I think a lot of people do think like
Trouble is,
that.
of course, you don't know where the bomb is going to land. And
It's
that's the
true,
trouble with
isn't it?
Michael's List. You can't tell anybody that they are on the list or they're not on the list, because that will create jealousies and worries. But equally, there are people on the list who don't want to come. And I know don't want to come. They'd rather do your scenario of take their chances up top, and if they die, they die, and if they don't, they don't.
I mean, enemies have come and gone over the years, haven't they? You know, sometimes it's Russia, and then we point the finger, or they point the finger at us, and we make friends, we lose friends all the time. Who do you think the threat would be from today if there was ever a nuclear bomb went off?
If I knew that, I'd be a very rich man.
That's very true. So we do...
No idea. We don't know. I mean, terrorism is obviously the flavour of the month at the moment.
Exactly. We
It's
stay
unpredictable.
close to the wind, don't we?
Yeah.
Because there is, you know, obviously the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and there's the Bin Ladens and everything. But who do you think the real enemies are, if we have an enemy?
Anyone who's got a radioactive bomb.
That's very true. This room is absolutely amazing. This looks like where it all goes on, the big engine room. Tell us about this one, Mike.
Well, you're quite right. It is amazing. It's been used in a lot of films as submarine engines and all sorts. But this is the main plant room, as you said. The big equipment you see there, that's just one giant refrigerator, keeping everything nice and cool. The fresh air from outside, where we've just been, would have been pumped through the primary filters. Then it comes in this room over there and goes through the secondary filters, and then through a very fine mist of water, which makes sure that any dust that has got through is drenched and therefore gets evacuated out of the bunker. And we then have fairly fresh air coming into the bunker here, which is obviously what we've then got to live on.
Was it quite noisy when it was in working order?
Certainly when these compressors are going, it's very, very noisy, yes.
But, need your earmuffs.
we don't need to keep the bunker cool now, because we don't have enough people in here to warrant that. Yes. So we just use the fans and the filters and keep them going.
It's like a ship's engine, isn't it?
It's very much like a ship's engine, yes. And say it's been used lots of times for film locations, people breaking in the roof and discovering it, that sort of thing. But yeah, it looks good, it looks big, but it's functional. And what it does is scrub the air to make sure that the people in here are going to be able to breathe non-biological, non-radioactive air.
So again, this room could be used in the event of a nuclear war. This could all be just fired up. It's just
Absolutely.
ready to...
Everything is ready to go in this bunker.
Everything is...
Everything
So
that we
literally it's
need
just flick a switch and off it goes.
Well, not a switch, a number of switches.
Number of
Metaphorically,
switches.
you're right. Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
Have you actually showed us the switches?
No.
No? Are you going to show us the switches?
There are switches.
Oh, there are switches! Okay, we'll have a look at the switches in a second. So this is the big baby. That would fire it all up.
This is one of the switches that would fire it all up, certainly. The bunker is split into essential and non-essential circuits. The essential, obviously, are the computers and the radios that are needed. So if we don't have enough electricity, it's the non-essential circuits that get shut down.
Okay.
The rest of it all starts here. Each of these switches turns something on, be it a fan, be it a cooling tower, be it a compressor. Those are the big switches. It's like one little button can make a bomb go off, isn't it? You think a big place like this, there'd be hundreds of switches, but there aren't. You just have a few.
That's what you see, isn't it? In the films, like, they press the red button and they turn the key, or is it they turn the key and they press the button?
And then it goes tick, 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 tick.
That's it. And you've got 4 minutes. Run for your life.
Colonel Danby to the counter room, please. Colonel Danby to the counter room, please.
As with your valuable drinking water. To minimize the danger from flying glass, you should draw your curtains and lower your blinds.
As we can see, this is where the Prime Minister would have slept at the time. Winston Churchill, did he ever pay a visit here?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay.
The Queen has been down here.
Oh, really?
And Margaret Thatcher has been down here.
Wow.
But
When was
that was in the... Well, before we had it, while it was still a ministry
Okay.
department bunker.
So what famous people have you met since you've owned this?
I mean, people who've come through, what you define as famous.
Well, people in government, I guess.
People in government, well, yes. We had Ian Duncan Smith down here, Eric Pickles, who is the chairman of the Conservative Party at the moment. I don't know, lots of film stars have been down here as well.
What was
But
the
not very good at names.
last big event that you held down here where government officials would have paid a visit, just more out of curiosity that they would have come?
A social event. It was a Conservative Party dinner.
Okay. Because you do have other functions going on here, don't you?
We often have functions going on here. Yes.
Can you tell a little bit about those?
Nothing really to tell. I mean, we do a very good function. We do whatever you want to eat, we will do for you. And people enjoy it because it's different.
Hired out,
It can be hired out, yes. So we have a wide variety of people who come down into the bunker here.
So, do you ever have people coming and staying overnight?
Well, the scouts stay overnight.
Okay.
They don't sleep, of course.
Having too much fun, I guess.
And it's always night down here. You've only got to turn the lights out.
Yes.
So it doesn't really matter when they come.
Yes, it must be very spooky, I guess.
Not really. It's the safest place in England, isn't it? You go to bed at night
Well, that's true.
with a millimetre of glass between you and that big rapist, whereas I've got 10 foot of reinforced concrete and 30 or 40 foot of dirt.
Depends what frightens you, though, doesn't it?
We won't go there.
Okay. Thanks a lot. This area here is supposed to be quite important, isn't it?
Well,
Apart from this room here.
Absolutely, but on this corridor there are 3 rooms. The first one is the Commissioner's.
Okay.
He would have been a cabinet minister. He'd have been supported by his principal officer in this middle room here, who would have been an ordinary minister or senior civil servant.
Right.
And they really are the ones that would have run this area. Because central government could no longer govern,
Yes.
when a bomb had gone off, it was then split down into regions. The country was split into 11 regions. This is the London bunker. This would have governed London and the South East.
Okay.
And so the Commissioner here would have made life and death, literally, decisions. Obviously try and stop people from looting and doing things they shouldn't be doing, and at the same time also trying to find survivors and give them food so that they could survive.
Yes, you can see it's a working room because of, again, the maps and the computers and
It's all
it's
very
all going on
utilitarian
there.
down here.
It certainly is, isn't it? No fluffy bunnies and pixies down
Absolutely
here.
not.
Okay, and the next room is?
Well, that's the Commissioner's room,
Okay.
which is the same as the other room. He would have been a cabinet minister.
You just come in.
Certainly.
Okay.
Again, a working room with a bed.
Yes.
But when he wasn't asleep, he would have had his secretary here as well. And he's the most important man here. The Prime Minister, if he'd come here, would have done what Prime Ministers do, trying to negotiate peace or that sort of thing. Whereas the Commissioner here would have been actually running this region.
He'd be the one doing all the work.
Region 5.1.
Mike, this room looks like a right hub of action. Did you have a special name and what went on here?
No, this is the government level floor. This is where every department of state would have been represented. You'll see the Ministry of Transport, Ministry of Housing, Ministry of, as it was then, Public Building and Works, even Social Security, the Home Office. They would have all been in here trying to coordinate the survival of those that had survived, allocating surviving resources from the various government stores to those of us who had managed to survive.
Yes.
And that was what they did. That was all what this floor really was doing, was just coordinating survival.
Now you say this is the room where they coordinated survival outside. Can you go into a bit more detail about what would have been going on outside?
Nothing would have been going on outside. Temperatures of
well, there was nothing to coordinate then, was there?
temperatures of minus 40, 45 degrees, no leaves on the trees, radiation everywhere, of course, no animals, nothing electronic working. Fires raging because petrol would have blown up with a heat blast and that sort of thing. It would have been fairly desolate out there. And so these people here would be under enormous stress, not knowing what their families had been, what their families had happened to them, and they would be trying to do their best to coordinate survival. Same time, you've got marauding gangs, those who've now got a gun, because the thing that's most important now, of course, is water and food.
Yes,
And
true.
that's what they want. Money's no good, and you've got to try and control them as well. Hopefully, the Commissioner here would have control of the army would have sufficient forces survived to be able to bring the country to a state of democracy again, rather than anarchy.
So this place here, the bunker, would have been coordinated if a nuclear blast had gone off or several nuclear blasts.
Whatever.
So if this
Or even
happened-
civil unrest during the Arthur Scargill
Yes.
coal miner strikes. They apparently manned this, fearing the country was perhaps going to slip into civil war.
Really? I didn't know that.
No.
So this was all in action when that was going
Absolutely.
on? Yes, because there's an anniversary of that at the moment,
There is
isn't
indeed,
Is
yes.
that 20 years?
Well,
is
it's
it?
been on telly, isn't it? So it's
Yes.
it's now-ish.
Now, we hear of bunkers being built today, and I believe there is one somewhere in Norway or an island off Norway, which I think Bill Gates has actually got something to do with it as well. And it's a seed bank. Do you know anything about that, Mike?
No, nothing at all.
Okay.
But obviously it's very important in the sort of situation we're talking about for there to be reserves that one can go to, if you know where they are, of course, because you're the survivor and those that know aren't there, to repopulate and get the world back in action again. Down here, of course, we have enough food, water and fuel to last us for a minimum of 3 months, which would eke out to 4 or 5, I guess, if you were in trouble. And then we're in trouble. If the government were really here, of course, they'd just send people out to the government food stocks to bring more food in, even if it meant those people who went would die, just like at Chernobyl when they had to fly over to drop the sand.
Yes, that actually happened on my birthday.
This would...
Now, you were saying that the temperatures were 45...
minus 45 degrees,
Minus
that sort of
45.
thing. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I didn't
The whole-
realise that it would drop as
Well,
much as that.
It would be like the situation that killed the dinosaurs. The sun would have been blotted out by all the dust that would have been thrown into the atmosphere. The radiation would have sorted everything else out.
If people are down here and they've got like a supply of 3 months' food to keep them going, how long after a nuclear holocaust would it take for, if say there was just one, for the planet or the land to get back to normal again?
Chernobyl was 20 years ago, and they're only just now going into some of the outer areas. The birds are there, but they're not letting humans in. But that doesn't necessarily mean that humans couldn't go in there if push came to shove. Radiation doesn't kill you immediately. We use it for curing cancer. It's the amount of dosage that you have.
But that was a radiation leak. It wasn't it wasn't
Same thing.
a bomb going off.
No, but
Oh, really?
But the bomb produces a blast and produces heat. When that's gone, it's the radiation that is carried by dust.
Okay.
When the bomb goes off, it takes the dust up into the atmosphere. The wind then takes that along. That's the plume. The heavier bits then start falling down. The lighter bits go along a bit further and fall down. So that's why you get different levels of radioactivity along the wind line.
I mean, it is a horrendous thing, but as I say, I think most people would rather be right underneath if it went off than not to live in the aftermath.
I don't know. I rather fancy being King of Essex.
What else can you show us?
Well, there is yet more.
Aha! Wow, this looks interesting.
You
Now,
should sit over there.
this certainly sets the scene, doesn't it?
The bomb has gone off, or one of the bombs gone off. You'll see that they've had to put bits of tape on their windscreen, windows. They put sandbags out there to stop the blast, bring it in. They've covered their kitchen table with all sorts of things, and they would go under there to keep the radiation out. They're in a room, an inner room in their house, which hasn't, well, hopefully it has because it's got windows, but the best that they can find is they've got one window. And they've taken some doors off as well from the rest of the house, which they've leant against the wall to make a bit more of a shelter. They obviously haven't been out for quite a while yet. They're using very, very old clothes, anything that they can find. The rest of the house, as far as we know, may well have been burnt down by the flash. And so they're living as best as they can, as frugally as they can, to survive.
How effective was all of this really? I mean, if a nuclear bomb went off and you were in the distance where radiation would fall, could you survive like this? Would it be possible?
The more cover that you have over you, the better it is. People think of lead. Lead is dense. You can do exactly the same thing by having more dirt or more concrete, which is a bunker, would you believe? So if you get in a room and you get underneath your kitchen table, then you are obviously further away from the radiation. And so that's a good thing to do.
But how long can you live under a kitchen table?
Till you run out of food and water. The Protect and Survive magazine that the government put out, that did actually encourage you to do this, as you can see from the picture there. Yes. It wasn't really for your protection, although it would have helped. The real thing of it was crowd control. If during the period of tension you're busy building your kitchen shelter, then you're not rioting, panicking and trying to get into government establishments. And if when the bomb has gone off, you've been killed, then you're dead in your own house with your checkbook, hopefully, so that you would be able to be identified fairly easily. Not a happy scenario, is it?
No, it's not.
As you can see, we have more Geiger counters here. Different sorts as well, because they did go a little bit more modern as time went on. This is the original paperwork. You'll see that we've got secret, confidential and restricted paper. And interestingly, you were issued with a pencil, and you didn't get a new one until you'd returned the stub. When you returned the stub, they gave you a metal tube to put it in, so that you could then use it right the way down to the bottom. Of course, there's no more W.H. Smiths out there, and so you did need to use everything. You'll see we've got bottles of ink, old-fashioned stuff, but it's there on typewriters, because mostly the computers wouldn't work, so if you're going to do anything other than write, you have to have typewriters.
Well, we do tend to live in a throwaway society, don't we?
Not anymore. When this has happened, you've really got to make everything.
You've really got to think about what you're using.
Recycling to the
I mean, myself personally, I do recycle. I recycle quite a lot and have done for a long time. But I still don't think people recycle enough, do you? I think we take it for granted.
I'm afraid I think it's a waste of time, because the amount of cost in collecting it, sorting it, and as we've seen now, they're now storing it in great big sheds. All councils are, because they can't recycle it, because no one is having steel at the moment, no one's producing paper anymore, and so it's all just building up, building up, building up, building up. So there's not much point in doing it now. There never has been much point, because what you're saving is being used up in the petrol that you have it for carting it about and sending it to China and getting it recycled and brought back again. So I think there's very little use in recycling. Only as a local thing, that if you have a shopping bag from Tesco, you want to use it in your dustbin, so that you at least use it twice rather than just the one journey.
I didn't realise it was all just. We can't surely all be being stored, can it?
Oh yeah, because nobody now, there's no steel wanted. We're in a recession, and so it's not being used. Lots of councils are now in trouble. They're having to hire aircraft hangars to put it all in. And of course, whereas you'd nicely sorted it, now it's not sorted because they're having to put it in a store. And that is encouraging rats, of course, and lots of other problems. And if the recession doesn't finish at the end of this year or beginning of next year, like they say, there's going to be a serious problem. They're going to have to go back to putting it in landfills. Some of them are already putting it back in landfills. Which, of course, is good, because that makes methane, and the methane then produces your gas, which produces your heating. So when you put it in a landfill, you're recycling. Just the same. You're making gas of it. But what they should really do is you really want to have these burners that burn all this rubbish, and they can now scrub it. And then all the rubbish we produce would be producing electricity. But of course there's a public thing against burning, because they're afraid that they'll bring toxins out, but they can scrub that now. So it's a pretty good way.
Oh, that's a whole new programme that I
It is
didn't
indeed.
even know.
Well,
Didn't even know about. But you see, I suppose because you look into all of this, you understand about the recycling, because this is where it would lead to, isn't
we
it?
were at one stage thinking of turning this into a data centre, and to do so you need an awful lot of electricity.
Yes.
And it seemed to us to be a good idea to have an electricity plant here that would bring in rubbish and burn it, and we could then sell the rest to the electricity board.
But you
But
didn't
apart
go
from
ahead
planning
with that.
problems, we didn't go ahead with that now.
No.
It's much better to have it as a museum.
That's true. Wow, there you go then, recycling. This room, Mike, well, I suppose it speaks for itself, doesn't it? Medical room. This is
It
where...
is indeed. If you've got 600 people down here for 3 months, somebody will get into some sort of trouble. So,
That's true.
so this was a small operating theatre just to deal with minor things. Of course, there wouldn't be any hospitals. Everybody thinks, well, you know, you can go to a hospital, but they won't survive any more than any other building. The doctors won't survive any more than any other person. And so if you're contained down here, you do need some sort of medical attention.
Yes. So what's going on with this lady?
Probably having their appendix out. You'll see we've got cardboard coffins. They fold up, and so they don't take up so much room. First, if somebody had died, they'd have been put in the body bag. You can only leave somebody in the body bag for about 3 days maximum. Otherwise, the bag bursts with the gases that come out of your body. And so they would need to be put in the body bag, in the cardboard coffins, and shoved outside somewhere, and buried at a later date.
How do they get them outside though?
You wear an NBC suit, nuclear, biological and chemical suit, with the mask.
So is
and
there
the
like
boots.
an in-between door then?
Yes, the blast doors.
Ah, so there's...
And then you
go out
then you-
in the
you go-
suit.
Exactly.
So anything that needs to go out for a short...
Goes out.
Short time, they run out.
Well, it would be a long
Come
time.
back and-
I mean, you just put them out, wouldn't
Yes.
you? You'd have to.
But the
And
people
then-
who were here who had to put something outside would literally run out quick and come back in.
I would think so.
Yes, very quickly.
Dressed in their NBC suits.
Yes.
Radiation, of course, halves every day.
Okay.
But of course, if you've got that much, then after 14 days you're going to be able to go out. But if you've got that much, or like Chernobyl, you're going to be 20 years. So it's all luck of the draw as to where you are, where the wind's blowing.
Yes, I suppose so. Now, through here, this is sleeping quarters?
Yes, there are a number of dormitories, 5 dormitories in the
Pizza
bunker,
there.
obviously.
Yep.
We'll be seeing some more later on.
Okay.
But you'll see they're double bunks. They use the hot bed system. That meant you got out of your bed, the next guy got straight into your nice hot bed. He was issued with a sort of sleeping bag. It was a sheet that had got room for a pillow. And this was yours. And so that's what you took with you.
You kept that?
You kept that. This is yours, because then you were just getting in and out of the bed. You'd
Oh,
only
I
use someone else's
see.
sheets. So this was your bed, your sheet. So when you got in the bed, you had your own sheet. They would have worn white paper-type overalls.
Okay.
There's no water. The water we've got, which is what
Well, that's
sustains
what I was-
life.
yeah, I
You
was
don't
thinking
use it
about
for
it.
flushing down loos. You don't use it for washing machines. You use it to drink and live. It will be smelly down here. Even when they held the 14-day exercises down here, the air vent used to smell of rotting cabbage when I used to walk over there. And that was with them washing and being fairly thing anyway. So
Because I thought
Think
with
2
the big
months now.
machine, everything was recycled, like even through washing, they could recycle the water.
no,
No,
not down here, no.
no, maybe I'm thinking
Once-
too high tech.
Absolutely. Once the bomb has gone off and we can no longer get water
Okay.
from the mains, our reservoir on the roof would supply us, and you would eke that out as much as you could. You'd use the, as you'll see in a minute, you use the toilets, the bucket toilets, and you'd pour that down the loo once a day.
This speaks for itself, doesn't it? Loos.
This is one of 5 loo blocks on the in the bunker. You see they've got showers, they've got loos, they've got wash basins. Once the bomb had gone off, then they would have stopped using the water. You'll see they've got Elsons there, so they'd have used the Elsons instead and conserved the water they could, because water is life.
So this is another room where they would have slept.
That's exactly right. You did have male and female down here. Ratio was about 5 to 1, 5 males to 1 female.
Oh, okay.
And so they had their own dormitory, obviously.
Yeah.
And of course you had some that were sergeants, I suppose, and higher ranks who demanded a space of their own. And so even though this was mainly civilian,
Yes.
so that's why the door shuts in the middle there.
I
so
see.
you could split it within a bit. But at the end of the day, it would have been pretty awful. No bedside lights, so every time someone came in, you'd have been woken, you hear the doors going there. There'd have been a hub going on anyway, because the other 300 people are working.
I guess you must have just got used to that.
I think you would. Like you can go to sleep on a train or go to sleep
I was going to say that. It's like people
whatever,
who live near train tracks, they just get used to the noise, don't they?
Even under Heathrow. Yes. This was, in its real life, a female dormitory. We've converted this to a function room, conference room, and we have many conferences and functions.
There been a place where there was a place for recreation?
Not that we found. I don't think that in the sort of crisis we're talking about, where you're working a double shift and then sleeping, that there would be very much chance for recreation anyway.
That's quite sad, really.
I don't know. Sleep sounds very good if you're exhausted.
So this room now is used for?
Conferences, functions, management meetings.
Who actually hires it then for conferences?
We've had insurance companies, we do product launches, wedding receptions even.
That's amazing.
Just anything. We're totally adaptable here.
Okay.
And obviously coach parties, when they want a meal, we bring them in here, so they're on their own. Car clubs, you name it, we do it.
Tell us about the tunnel.
Well, the fire brigade insisted that we had another exit in the bunker, so that if you were on the top and there was a fire, you could escape. So it's quite right. So we employed some diamond cutting people to do the job of cutting through. Quite amazing. They had a rubber band covered in diamonds that just went round and round and round and round and round and round. And you can see they cut the four places, and you can see the marks actually on the walls here. It took them 11 weeks to cut through it. To get the block out, because not only is it 10 foot thick, but it's also reinforced and made like concrete should be made, with really good tough stone. And so it was actually quite a feat to make this exit through the bunker wall.
So it was cut with diamonds?
Cut with diamonds, yes. And then having cut the cube out, they then bored a hole through, which is what that is, and then pumped it up pneumatically, and that cracked it and broke it. And so they were then able to cart it out in little bits. You can see that the reinforcing is all the way through here,
I can see
this way and that way.
Bands.
So that's making it strong. Very good, strong stone in there, and that's, as you say, where the diamond rubber band went.
We've come to the canteen. This is where it all, I suppose this was the hub, wasn't it, where people would gather, have their meals, and this is where they cooked for up to 600?
In the first life, yes, it was 600. Later on, it was about 450. So it was open 24 hours a day. Obviously, each shift, as it came off, had something to eat, probably went then to sleep, or I don't know what, but it was open all the time.
What would the meals have been like then?
Well, originally, I guess they'd have brought in perishable food, which they refused, but after that, they'd have used the ordinary rat packs, tinned food, dried food, anything that obviously will keep for an indefinite period.
Okay, where was all the food stored?
Everywhere. It was stored in the pantry, but it was stored under beds, on top of cupboards, just everywhere. The nice little brown boxes that contain the rations, just everywhere to keep everybody alive.
Yeah, I guess so.
And yes, this was the social part of it, obviously.
Yes.
Your one little bit of relaxation that you got. It is the original kitchen. This is what the Home Office used.
Oh really? So it hasn't changed much then?
No. No.
But as we can see, it's when
it's still a very good commercial chicken.
Walk around,
Absolutely.
yes, and as you say, when you hire it out for parties, it's all functioning, so it all works.
Absolutely.
Yes, great stuff. So, just on our sort of closing note, Mike, if you'd like to tell us a little bit more about how people can come if they want to hire this place. It's fascinating because they can come and stay overnight and have their parties and their weddings and all kinds of things.
We are open to any suggestion of anything.
Okay.
We try not to have too many youngsters who are going to run riot. But obviously if anybody wants to hire it, they go on our website, secretnuclearbunker.co.uk, and we're open all year round.
Okay. Anytime. They can just come.
They can just come when we're open between 10 and 4.
Okay. So, does anybody give a tour? Can anybody get a tour? Do they just help themselves when they come into the...
They help themselves to an audio wand,
Right.
and they just go round. It takes about an hour, hour and a half to go round, and then they pay in the honesty box when they get here. Most people are very honest and don't try and cheat us at all.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Well, it certainly is a fantastic experience, and it's such an unusual place. I mean, I guess there isn't anything else like it in the country, is there?
Well, there would be the country is riddled with bunkers.
What, as big as this one?
Some bigger than this one. Yes, the one at Caution, for example, is bigger than this one.
Okay.
And High Wycombe is bigger than this one, but that's a military one. So you've got military bunkers,
Right.
so you've got Home Office bunkers, you've got district council, borough council, utility bunkers, all spread all over the country, absolutely everywhere.
Are they open like this one is?
No, no, no. There are very few that are open.
That's what I was
there's
thinking.
There's us here at Kelvedon
Because
Hatch.
I haven't heard of anything else apart
There's
from
Hack
this one.
Green in Cheshire and Troywood up in Scotland.
Okay.
They're the only ones that are regularly open.
Right. It's been absolutely incredible. What an experience. And I must admit, I would recommend anyone to come and try it and just see what it was like and feel what it must have been like if that had happened. But thank you so much for your time, Mike. It's been absolutely
Absolutely my
brilliant.
pleasure.
Thank you.
Do come back and visit us in the real
Oh,
capacity.
we will. Thank you very much. Cheers.